Is your Canadian citizenship truly permanent? The 2026 changes, worrying immigrant communities. There is a question circulating quietly through immigrant communities across this country right now. Not loudly, not in the headlines every morning, but in community centers, in family group chats, in conversations between neighbors who came to this country years ago, built lives here, paid taxes here, raised their children here. The question is this: is Canadian citizenship as permanent as we were told it is? And the reason that question is being asked, the reason it has moved from a whisper to a genuine policy concern, is that 2026 is bringing a set of changes, reviews, and legislative signals that are making some of the most established immigrant communities in Canada quietly uneasy. I'm Joseph, and today we are going to examine this issue carefully, methodically, and without exaggeration, because this topic deserves serious analysis, not alarm. Stay with me through this entire video, because by the end, you will understand not just what is changing, but what it means for your retirement income, your OAS eligibility, your residency history, and your long-term security in Canada. To understand why immigrant communities are concerned about 2026, we need to step back and understand the broader environment in which these changes are unfolding. Canada is, demographically and fiscally, under real pressure. By 2030, it is projected that nearly 1 in 4 Canadians will be over the age of 65. The federal government's own fiscal projections have acknowledged that old age security, the foundational monthly benefit paid to Canadian seniors, represents one of the single largest and fastest growing expenditures in the federal budget. At the same time, Canada has been running consecutive deficits. Inflation, though slowing, has permanently elevated the cost of delivering indexed benefits like OAS and the Guaranteed Income Supplement, or GIS. These are not political observations. They are fiscal realities that any government, regardless of stripe, must eventually address. Now layer onto that a second development, a renewed and intensifying policy conversation about citizenship integrity, residency fraud, and the conditions under which individuals can access Canadian public benefits. In recent years, federal departments including Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, commonly known as IRCC, and the Canada Revenue Agency, have begun cross-referencing data in ways they historically did not. Residency declarations, tax filing histories, time spent outside the country, address records, banking patterns. What this means, practically, is that the administrative machinery of the Canadian government is becoming more precise and more investigative in how it verifies whether individuals are who they say they are, lived where they claim to have lived, and are entitled to the benefits they are receiving or applying for. For the vast majority of Canadians, this will never be an issue. But for a specific and significant segment of the immigrant population, those who became citizens years or even decades ago, who may have spent extended periods outside Canada, who may have gaps in their Canadian tax filing history, or whose residency documentation is less than complete, this shift in government data practice carries real implications. Let me be precise here, because precision is what this topic demands. There is no single piece of legislation called the 2026 Citizenship Revocation Act. That is not what we are discussing. What we are discussing is a confluence of several policy developments, some already underway, some coming into sharper focus in 2026, that together create a new landscape for immigrant Canadians, particularly those approaching or in retirement. First, enhanced residency verification for OAS applicants. Old age security in Canada is not simply a reward for reaching age 65. It is a residency-based program. To receive a full OAS pension, a Canadian must have lived in Canada for at least 40 years after the age of 18. To receive any OAS at all, a minimum of 10 years of Canadian residency after age 18 is required. What is changing is the rigor with which Service Canada is verifying those residency claims. Starting in 2025 and accelerating into 2026, Service Canada has been expanding its use of data, matching pulling information from CRA tax records, border crossing data maintained by the Canada Border Services Agency, and IRCC immigration files to verify that OAS applicants have actually resided in Canada for the years they are claiming. This is not new in concept. What is new is the scale and the precision. Seniors who applied for OAS in previous decades may have faced relatively limited scrutiny of their residency declarations. That era is ending. Second, strengthened CRA cross-referencing for GIS recipients. The Guaranteed Income Supplement GIS is a non-taxable monthly benefit provided to low-income OAS recipients. It is one of Canada's most important poverty prevention tools for seniors, but it is also means-tested and residency-dependent. The CRA has been expanding its capacity to identify GIS recipients who spend significant time outside Canada, beyond the 6-month threshold that typically triggers a suspension of GIS payments. This includes enhanced monitoring of individuals who may be declaring Canadian residency for benefit purposes while spending the majority of their time abroad. Third, citizenship revocation policy under review. This is the dimension that has generated the most community concern, and it requires the most careful framing. Canadian citizenship under current law can be revoked, but only under very specific and serious circumstances. Historically, this has applied primarily to individuals who obtained citizenship through fraud or misrepresentation, or who were later found to have committed war crimes or crimes against humanity before becoming citizens. What is under renewed discussion in 2026, and what has triggered significant concern in certain legal and immigrant advocacy circles, is whether the framework for revocation, based on misrepresentation, should be applied more broadly, and whether the government's enhanced data matching capabilities will surface cases where individuals provided inaccurate residency information during their citizenship applications. The concern is not that citizenship is suddenly fragile for the average law-abiding Canadian immigrant. The concern is that individuals who, years ago, may have navigated the immigration and citizenship process with incomplete information, or who made administrative errors in residency declarations, now face an environment where those historical records are being reviewed with modern data tools. Fourth, the 2026 OAS review cycle. Every several years, the federal government undertakes a formal review of the sustainability and structure of OAS. The next major review cycle is expected to generate policy proposals in 2026. Analysts and pension experts are watching closely for signals about potential changes to eligibility age, clawback thresholds, or residency calculation methodology. Now let us be specific about who is most exposed to these developments. The first group is immigrant seniors who are currently applying for OAS or who will apply within the next 5 years. If your residency history has gaps, if there are years in which you were outside Canada for extended periods, or years in which you did not file a Canadian tax return, you should be aware that Service Canada may scrutinize your application more carefully than applicants in previous years faced. The second group is GIS recipients who travel internationally. If you are currently receiving the Guaranteed Income Supplement and you spend time outside Canada, you need to understand the rules precisely. GIS payments are generally suspended after 6 months outside Canada in a calendar year. The CRA's enhanced monitoring means that individuals who have been exceeding this threshold, perhaps without fully understanding the rule, are at greater risk of having overpayments clawed back, sometimes years later. The third group is naturalized citizens who became Canadian through the immigration process over the past 2 to 3 decades, particularly those who immigrated from countries with high rates of transnational living where it is common to divide time between Canada and a country of origin. This pattern of living is understandable and legal. but it creates documentation complexity that, under the new environment of enhanced scrutiny, requires careful management. The fourth group is families, adult children of immigrant seniors who may need to help their parents navigate the documentation requirements of OAS and GIS applications, or who may need to understand the implications of their parents' residency history on benefit eligibility. Let us translate this into real numbers, because the financial stakes here are significant. As of 2025, the maximum monthly OAS pension for a Canadian aged 65 to 74 is approximately $713. For those aged 75 and over, it is approximately $784 per month, reflecting the 10% enhancement introduced in 2022. For a senior who qualifies for the full amount, that is between $8,500 and $9,400 per year from OAS alone. But OAS is prorated based on years of residency. A senior with 30 years of Canadian residency, rather than the full 40, would receive 75% of the maximum, reducing their annual OAS income by over $2,000 per year. Now add the GIS. The maximum monthly GIS for a single senior in 2025 is over $1,000 per month. For low-income seniors, this is not supplementary income. This is foundational income. Losing GIS, even temporarily, due to a residency compliance issue, can represent a financial crisis. Consider a practical scenario. A senior who immigrated to Canada in the 1990s, became a citizen, but spent 18 months caring for an elderly parent abroad between 2005 and 2007. They did not fully document those absences in their residency record. They are now applying for OAS. Under the new verification environment, that gap may be identified, questioned, and may result in a downward adjustment to their OAS entitlement. This is not a hypothetical designed to alarm. It is a realistic illustration of the kind of case that immigration lawyers and pension advocates are increasingly being asked to address. It is worth asking, with genuine analytical neutrality, why the government is moving in this direction now. The answer is not sinister. It is, in large part, fiscal. Canada's OAS program costs the federal government approximately $60 billion annually. That number will grow substantially as the boomer generation ages fully into OAS eligibility. The government has a legitimate interest in ensuring that every dollar of that expenditure reaches individuals who are genuinely entitled to it. Enhanced residency verification is, from a policy standpoint, a reasonable tool for protecting the integrity of a program that tens of millions of Canadians depend on and contribute to through their taxes. Similarly, the heightened scrutiny of citizenship integrity is not a new impulse. The principle that Canadian citizenship must be obtained through honest process is one that has broad political and public support across the spectrum. The concern raised by advocacy groups, and it is a legitimate concern, is whether the implementation of these enhanced tools is proportionate, whether it is accompanied by adequate education and support for the communities most affected, and whether individuals who made good faith errors decades ago will be treated with appropriate fairness and due process. These are valid questions, and they are questions that will be debated in earnest as 2026 approaches. Immigration lawyers across Canada have begun advising clients, particularly those in the 55 to 70 age range, who are approaching OAS eligibility, to proactively review their residency records and ensure their documentation is in order before applying. Pension advocacy organizations have raised concerns that the expanded data matching regime, while legitimate in principle, may disproportionately affect seniors who lack the administrative literacy or the legal resources to effectively challenge incorrect assessments. Community organizations representing South Asian, Chinese, Filipino, and Caribbean immigrant communities, among the largest and most established immigrant populations in Canada, have reported increased inquiries from members seeking clarity on how their residency histories will be evaluated. Legal scholars who study Canadian citizenship law have noted that while citizenship revocation for fraud remains rare and legally complex, The expansion of data matching tools creates a new category of risk for individuals whose historical documentation may not withstand modern scrutiny, even if their actual residency was legitimate. The federal government, for its part, has maintained that these measures are about program integrity, not targeting specific communities. That framing is reasonable. But the practical impact of enhanced verification falls most heavily on those whose lives have been most transnational, and that statistically means immigrant communities. If any part of this analysis applies to your situation or to the situation of a parent, spouse, or family member, here is what I would encourage you to do, not out of panic, but out of prudent preparation. Step 1. Request your Service Canada records and your IRCC file. You have the right, under Canada's Access to Information and Privacy legislation, to request the records that the government holds about you. This includes your immigration file, your citizenship application history, and your Service Canada records. Reviewing these files before you apply for OAS gives you the opportunity to identify any discrepancies and address them proactively. Step 2. Ensure your CRA tax filing history is complete. One of the primary data sources that Service Canada uses to verify residency is CRA tax filing records. If there are years in which you did not file a Canadian tax return, even if you had minimal or no Canadian income in those years, that gap may be interpreted as a residency gap. Speak with a tax professional about whether filing returns for prior years is advisable and possible. Step 3. Gather documentary evidence of your Canadian residency. Bank statements, utility bills, medical records, lease or mortgage documents, employment records. The more contemporaneous documentation you have of your physical presence in Canada during the years you are claiming as residency years, the stronger your position when applying for OAS. Step 4. Understand the GIS rules on international travel. If you are currently receiving GIS, or if you expect to receive GIS in retirement, understand clearly that payments are typically suspended after 6 consecutive months outside Canada. If you travel frequently, keep records of your departures and returns. If you have questions, contact Service Canada directly or consult a benefits advisor. Step 5. Consult an immigration lawyer if you have specific concerns. If you have reason to believe that your residency history, your citizenship application, or your benefit history may not withstand enhanced scrutiny, the time to consult a professional is now before an issue is raised by the government, not after. Looking ahead, several developments merit close attention. The 2026 OAS review will be an important signal. If the government moves to alter the residency calculation methodology, adjust the partial OAS formula, or introduce new verification requirements into the application process, it will have direct financial implications for current and future retirees with non-standard residency histories. The broader trajectory of government data integration bringing together CRA, CBSA, IRCC, and Service Canada records is not going to reverse. If anything, it will deepen. The administrative state is becoming more data capable, not less. That is not inherently bad, but it means that the margin for undocumented or poorly documented history is shrinking. For the immigrant communities most affected, the practical imperative is to treat documentation and administrative completeness as a serious priority, not something to attend to when a problem arises, but something to maintain proactively as an ongoing matter of financial and legal hygiene. There is also a policy advocacy dimension here that deserves attention. Community organizations, legal aid societies, and immigrant advocacy groups are and should be engaged with federal consultations on these issues. The voices of the communities most affected need to be part of the policy conversation, ensuring that enhanced program integrity does not come at the cost of fairness to individuals who built their lives in good faith under Canada's immigration system. Canadian citizenship is not under generalized threat. Let me be clear about that. For the overwhelming majority of naturalized Canadians, individuals who came here, put down roots, built careers, raised families, and contributed to this country, 2026 does not represent a crisis. But it does represent a shift, a tightening, a new level of administrative rigor applied to questions that were previously handled with less precision. And for those whose residency histories are complex, whose documentation is incomplete, or who simply have not given serious thought to how their past decades of living will look to a government data system, this is a moment that calls for attention. The cost of being unprepared in lost OAS entitlement, in suspended GIS payments, in administrative battles that take years to resolve, is real. It can run to tens of thousands of dollars over a retirement lifetime. It can mean the difference between financial stability and financial hardship in the years when Canadians are least equipped to absorb that kind of shock. That is why this matters. That is why we are discussing it today. My name is Joseph. If this analysis was useful to you, I would ask you to do 3 things. Subscribe to this channel so that you receive future analysis on Canadian pension policy, government benefit changes, and retirement planning developments as they unfold. Share this video with someone in your family or community who needs to hear it, a parent approaching retirement, a sibling who immigrated years ago, a neighbor who has never thought carefully about their residency documentation. And leave a comment below. Tell me your situation, your concern, or your question. I read them, and they inform the topics we cover next. Canada's retirement and benefits system is one of the most important and complex financial structures in most Canadians' lives. Understanding it clearly, carefully, and early is not optional. It is essential. Stay informed, stay prepared. I'll see you in the next one.